Board.
How can students stay connected while living in the most socially disconnected generation that has ever existed? How will the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and social distancing affect students' ability to connect and care for each other? These questions are occupying the minds of parents, teachers, and educators across our nation. The answer is friendship. The answer is Frenzy. When we learn friendship, we learn it for life. Start a Frenzy in your school today.
Teachers love learning. They love watching the wheels turn in a student's head and seeing their excitement when a problem is finally solved. We do too. That's why we launched Facts Ed Coaching, a fully customizable professional development program. Like a head coach uses film, we use patented video technology to support teachers and improve their skills. Teachers record lessons. Coaches give feedback in video. Then they meet virtually or in person to strategize for upcoming lessons, all on your schedule. Plus, we'll help you find funding to cover the cost of your coaching program. Because when teachers are empowered to pursue their love of learning, everyone wins. Learn more at factsed.com/coaching.
Hi there, my name's Rebecca from Archangel Tablets, and I'm currently based out of South Florida. It's not just that Archangel Tablets can help the school with, cutting edge technology and upgrading your fleet and everything. It's really all about the students because those are the ones that we need to look after. If you have the right technology, you can actually give that education with those Catholic values right back to your students. So come on over and have a chat with us. Looking forward to meeting you.
Designed to motivate students while supporting educators, iReady combines powerful assessments with actionable data that points to meaningful digital and print instruction. Adaptive, standards-aligned assessments provide insights into student needs, performance, and growth. Online lessons provide instruction and practice tailored to accelerate student growth, helping all learners achieve grade-level expectations and beyond.
Well, hello and welcome, everyone. I am Valerie Pierce, and I am an author, I'm an educator, and I am the Director of Content Development for Frenzy.
And my name is Dr. Marcela Chiromo. I am an international psychologist. I consult with Frenzy from doing workshops like this and also writing curriculum. And I'm happy that you joined us today.
Exactly. We're excited that you're here. And today we're going to talk about the very important topic, culturally responsive classrooms. So we want to say that at the top that this is a sharing, learning collaborative. So please use the chat, talk back to us, ask us questions. If something gives you an aha moment, please be sure to let us know that as well. But this is a shared time. You're educators, you're experts in this field, and we just want to have a good time together. So how about we go on and dive in? So I want to share this. From the very beginning, God's design and intention was for all of us to do life, love, and community together. That was his design from the very beginning. Acts 17:26 says this. It says, from one man, he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. And I love Genesis 1:27 because it boldly informs us. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. And so what that means is when we talk about culture, when we talk about our students' education, all of this is a part of the design and plan of God. So we're not only doing educational academic work, but today we're doing God's work. Amen. So let's come within this time. Our next slide says simply this: teachers are cultural translators, cultural bridge makers. And what this means to us is that you are the captain of the ship. You are going to be the bridge for your students and your classroom in terms of understanding culture, in terms of understanding differences, and in terms of normalizing that and that being a beautiful thing. You are the captain, you are the cultural translator. And so as the educator, as you're the captain, what we found is that sometimes we often offer education in the school environment within a limited scope that's detrimental to students' sense of belonging and academic achievement, particularly those students of color. But as demographics shift, we have to develop a culturally responsive classroom environment where all students are feeling seen, they have a sense of agency, and they can thrive. So what this means is that we have to rethink what learning looks like. When we rethink what learning looks like, we're talking about inclusive classrooms where compassion, empathy, and good citizenship are paramount. So let's dig in. First things first, what is a culturally responsive classroom? I'm glad you asked. A culturally inclusive and responsive classroom is one where students and staff alike recognize, appreciate, and capitalize on diversity so as to enrich the overall learning experience for all students.
Yes, that's really good, Valerie. And I want to point out two words in this definition. The first word is inclusive. So this idea that, you want to be inclusive, this suggests that you recognize your students in your classroom and all your students. And you incorporate the needs that you find your students need in the classroom. So in order to do that, you need to know who's in your classroom. And the second one I want to point out is responsive. And in this, we're going to talk more about relationship, but this suggests that you are aware of the needs of your students in your classroom. And to do this all happens in relationship, because this is an interactive process. And we'll talk about this throughout this presentation.
So to get our time started, we would like you to look at the next slide. And this is what we call the cultural iceberg. And if you notice, an iceberg is, well, it's an iceberg and you can see the tip, but as you go deeper under the water, deeper and deeper, there's this huge iceberg underneath. So when you think of the cultural iceberg and your students, what we want you to think about is what's visible and then what's invisible or intangible. So some of the visible things that you'll see and you'll notice in your classroom is like culture, crafts, music, art, holidays, clothing, all of these things, language, these are kind of the visible things. Architecture and artifacts, these are things that are visible. But when you go deeper underneath the iceberg, there are things that you can look at, such as values, beliefs, gender roles, concepts of beauty, humor, modesty, body language. All of these are under the deeper parts of the iceberg.
Yes, and I want to give an example from myself of what that looks like. So personal space, I grew up in Zimbabwe, right? We're a community,
awesome.
We're all in each other's space. That's not as defined as it is here. And coming back to the United States, I had to learn that, personal space is a big deal here, right? And in my classrooms, when I'm working with students, as well as also to understand how my definition of personal space looks different with the people that are in the classroom and this, the young people I'm working with. So that was a big one for me.
And that's one of those deeper, under the surface things on the cultural iceberg.
Great. So let's move on to talking about why is this even important? Why are we talking about culturally responsive classrooms? There are benefits to it. And before, I want to highlight these two statistics that are out there. According to the National Center of Education Statistics, the school-age population in the United States is becoming more racially and ethnically diverse. Now, this is in 2019. That's pretty recent. You can imagine how that's also growing. And 49% of US kids ages 5 and younger are children of color. Now, I want to set the tone. We want to set the tone. Absolutely. That our classes currently are racially and ethnically diverse, and in the future, they're going to look the same. So this is why we're actually having this conversation, is because this is something that we're seeing right now. It's going to be at stake, right? So let's go through some of these benefits. The first benefit that we have is that it just facilitates brain processing. There is research that says that if we include a student's ethnic identity into the classroom, it increases mathematical thinking and reading comprehension.
And you know what, if I can add to that, there is brain science work done by Zaretta Hammond, culturally specific brain science work. And one of the statements that she makes is, when a brain encounters information, especially during the act of reading and learning, it's looking for and making connections to what's personally relevant and meaningful. So that's brain work. That's literally happening while a child is learning.
Yes, and neuroscience research also suggests that this happens because we learn best from things that we already know. So bringing in who the student is into the classroom allows them to learn more. And this is why we're actually doing this, to increase learning. So let's continue to go down our benefits. It motivates and engages students. If you've noticed how in your classrooms, you may have students that enjoy playing video games, right? So if you just mention video games in your classroom, see how some students light up, right? It's because that's part of their world. That's part of who they are. So doing that when it comes to a young person's culture and ethnic identity is it's a benefit. It also engages your students. It cultivates critical thinking and problem-solving skills. It strengthens students' racial and ethnic identities, and it promotes a sense of safety and belonging. Now, these are things that we want our students to feel in your classrooms, and they are probably already feeling some of these things, but this also enhances, right, their ability to learn in the class. So let's move on to our next reflection. We're going to reflect.
And so what we want, we know that we've given some information, and we've given some information that's pretty fast. It may be new to some and not new to others, but let's just take a moment. And what we'd like you to reflect on in this moment is two things. What do you know about culturally responsive classrooms? And then what do you want to know about culturally responsive classrooms? And if you have a piece of paper, if you have pencil, we'd love for you to journal, or you got your iPad, whatever you use. But just taking that moment of reflection so that as we go through our time together, you can kind of track, you know, what you're learning and what you know in those aha moments.
Okay, so let's move on to the next section. I think one of the big questions is, how do you even do this? How do you create culturally responsive classrooms? And that's why we're here and having this conversation. And today we're going to look at it from a social emotional learning model. That's how we're going to talk about how to create these classrooms. So before we do that, let's define what social emotional learning is and what the practices are. So it is a framework that fosters knowledge, skills, and attitudes across 5 areas of competence and multiple key settings to establish equitable learning environments that advance students' learning and development. Again, this is the whole goal of this, is to enhance learning and development of students in your classrooms.
And I want to say something to that as well. Understand that we know this is not easy work, that this can be difficult, particularly when you're not from the culture of your students. But we hope that you will see this in our time as what I always call the marathon and not the sprint. So take a deep breath, relax, ease into this frenzy moment, and we're going to give you some more.
Okay, so what we're going to talk about now is self-awareness.
Yeah. So self-awareness, I'm going to talk about this a little bit, and this is one of the 5 core competencies of social emotional learning. So first is self-awareness. We're going to start with you. And self-awareness is the ability to recognize personal emotions, thoughts, values, strengths, and limitations, and how they influence behavior across context. So that's right. The focus is on you right now. And it's important to start with ourselves because knowledge about ourselves increases our ability to learn and make adjustments. And as an educator, one of the things that I always tell my students, the best journey you can take, the first and best journey is to knowing yourself. So an example of this would be understanding what your beliefs are about teaching a diverse group of students. This is going to mean that you're going to have to examine your own biases and your own judgments. You'll have to be honest with yourself, or as it said, to thine own self, be true, and explore where there is room to learn. Have tough conversations with yourselves and others.
Yes, and that is a challenging thing to do, and I think it's a great reminder for us to take on. The second competency that we want to highlight is self-management. This is the ability to manage behaviors to achieve personal goals. And to do this, when we are aware of ourselves, we're able to manage our responses. Now, you'll notice that responses are really important because the way that we respond to students in classrooms makes a difference in how they feel.
Can you say that again?
Yeah,
Preach that.
yes, right? The way we respond to our students in classrooms sets the tone of how they're going to feel. What's the culture of the classroom? So this is actually a really important one. It also mirrors to your students what the students should be doing in the classrooms with each other. So they're mirroring, you're showing them how they should be treating each other as well. An example of this is just leaning into curiosity over withdrawal. So it's leaning in to be curious more about what's going on. And we're going to go deeper into these. We're just kind of setting the tone of what SEL is.
So thank you. Our next competency is social awareness. And when we talk about social awareness, we're talking about the ability to understand the perspectives and empathize with others, including those from diverse backgrounds, cultures, and contexts. So we've already looked at ourselves. We've talked about self-awareness. We've talked about self-management, but now we're talking about social awareness, the world around us, because, okay, it's cliche, but nonetheless true. No man is an island. Yeah. We all are in this thing called Earth and humanity together. So an example of this means you're going to have to be willing to hear and respect different perspectives in your classrooms. And we will dive deeper into that in a little bit, but just let that sit with you just a moment and we'll go to our next.
Yeah, so the fourth competency is relationship skills. This is the ability to form positive relationships, work in teams, and deal effectively with conflict. Now, this is important because this is when you're now starting to interact. You're aware of what's happening around us. So now how do we interact with each other? This is where the work can be done when it comes to creating culture responsive classrooms. Relationships are important to human existence. We know that because you just mentioned, we're not an island. We want to be in relationship with each other. And building relationships across difference increases our ability to learn. An example of this could be knowing or learning the names of how to pronounce the names of your students correctly. That is an important thing because that shows that you see the students, you are curious about them, you want to know who they are. And also it shows this ability of, we're always going to stumble at some point, right? Yeah. We're not going to get maybe pronouncing the name right all the time,
Mhm.
but that just shows that you care and you want to learn how to pronounce their name.
And you're willing to do the work. And your students may even laugh about it, but when they know that you really care and that you're really trying, it
Mhm.
makes a difference.
Yes.
So that leads us to our fifth and last core competency, and that is responsible decision making. Responsible decision making is the ability to make constructive choice about personal and social behavior. So this includes the capacities to consider and evaluate the benefits and consequences of various actions for personal, social, and collective well-being. I like that word,
Yeah.
collective well-being. Collective well-being, and anticipating and evaluating the consequences of one's actions and reflecting on one's role to promote personal and community well-being. And these words keep coming up: community, collective, connection. You'll hear that a lot. And an example of this is understanding actions, positive and negative, impact the collective and not just the individual.
That's good.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's just kind of recap these 5 competencies that we just talked about. The first one is self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making.
So as we've done those,
Yeah, so, and we're gonna go into, again, some time to reflect. I love reflections.
Yes.
I think that this is a good place to see where we're at, to locate ourselves. And I'm gonna actually ask you this question. And the reflection is, which one of these competencies would you say are easier for you, Valerie, and why?
okay, the competency that is easiest for me, easiest, not just easy, it's a work in progress, but is easy for me, is social awareness. The idea of collectivity and community, village, and tribe is almost innate in me as an African American woman. That's really important from our earliest moments. You know, you understand that you're a part of a collective. So that's kind of intrinsically in part of me. So it also includes, though, taking the perspective of others, showing concern and feelings for others, and recognizing strength in others. These are things that are easier for me to do. And so that's kind of how I lean in and dive into our time together with you. But I would like to ask for you, Dr. Chiromo, which one of these competencies would be most challenging for you and why? And you all consider these as well.
Yes, for me, it's self-management. So I know that I tend to withdraw, right? That's my thing to do, is I withdraw instead of addressing what's going on. We were just talking about these competencies of relationships and this idea of interacting, right? When I come across where, there's maybe conflict, I tend to withdraw. And what I realize is that when I do that, I'm actually limiting myself from this ability to learn about myself more, to learn about what's happening around me. So that one's it's a tough one, but I know that this one's necessary for me to be able to push through.
Absolutely.
So I increase learning for myself. I do want to say that I hope that you all are able to answer these questions as well for yourselves, because we're doing this together. We're actually just having a conversation, but would love for you all to take time and answer these questions as well.
And again, if you have any thoughts, if you have any questions, ahas, anything, feel free to use the chat. It just helps us all engage and connect better today.
So let's move on to our next
Let's go.
Our next part of it, and we're gonna dive deeper into how do we create culture responsive classrooms. And we're gonna highlight 3 high impact ways to do this. And again, we're gonna use this using social emotional learning. So you're gonna see some of these competencies come up as we go through them.
So number 1, we're talking about self-awareness. Number 1,
So self-awareness is the ability to understand one's own emotions, thoughts, values, and how they influence behavior across contexts. So this is really, again, reflecting on what you know as a teacher and what you don't know. And this is really an important place to start because, again, you want to know where you're at as an educator, as a teacher, and working with young people. What we would like to do now is just go through some really practical ways, hopefully give some examples. Absolutely. And as we do this, the hope is that you can pick one out of these competencies or practical ways that we're talking about that you can actually go and use when you leave this, or even tomorrow. So as we go through them and try to give some examples of this, please be noting down like what you can actually go do tomorrow in your classroom with your students.
Yeah, because we realize that this is a conversation like the cultural iceberg, that there's surface and then there's deeper and deeper and deeper levels. But today we do want to give you just some hands-on practical things that will help you feel empowered to get ready, get set, and then go.
Yeah, so our first practical way is know your value system. Now, this is important because we operate from our own value system. From a psychological perspective, we're not just, I'm not just here, you're not just here. You have a history, you have experiences, and you develop a value system based on what you've experienced.
So Dr. Chiromo, are you telling me that children don't come into the classroom a blank slate? Is that what you're saying?
No, they don't. No, they don't. No, they don't. They, human beings are, complex in general. I think that understanding, for me, if I understood, like I just talked about my background and where I'm from, and if I walk in a classroom that's diverse, right, it's important for me to know, personal space, right? What is the difference between, my personal space and somebody else's personal space? So we want to keep that in mind. So can you talk to us, Valerie, about the next two?
Absolutely. So the next two we'll talk about understanding what you know and do not know, and then examining prejudices and biases. It's important to understand what you know and don't know, because we get it. Getting to know students of another culture, it's not easy, especially with the underlying invisible things that you can't readily see. However, as educators, you all know we use this chart. It's a precursor for literacy. It's called the KWL chart: the know, the want to know, and then the learn. And so what we believe is that if you take that lens for your time in understanding your students, culturally responsive classrooms, culturally inclusive classrooms, that's going to really benefit you, because as you lean into learning, as you lean into what you know and what you don't know, you're going to learn. And then this is going to give your students a sense of connection and belonging in your classroom.
That's good.
Examining prejudices and biases. Okay, newsflash, we all have them. So we're not saying it's not that you're a bad person. I'm not a bad person, but we all have them. And so when we examine those and when we're honest about those, then real growth happens. And I love this quote that I read recently, and it is not my own, but it says, "Your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits, and your habits become your values." And so when we talk about examination, we're talking about examining so that you show up in your classroom and the world in a way that really benefits our students.
Yes, that's really good. And there's another point that we have is seek support from others. I do want to say, as a African American woman, I too have biases, right? And I don't know every single student that's coming into my classroom. I too need support. And I just wanted to point that out, that, and it goes along with our next point of taking a growth mindset, is that it's really important that we know that we don't know everything.
I don't know. Works in progress.
Yes, we are. We certainly are. And for me, I know that when I walk into a room, a classroom, that we may look the same, but we may not have the same backgrounds, right?
Absolutely.
And that's important to recognize, is that we all want to take on this growth mindset of that you're learning about somebody.
Because we look the same right now. We do. However, we're very different and we have very different backgrounds.
Exactly. And then the last point I want to, share is that having an accountability partner to check in with. Now, this is important. I think that, like we just said, we don't know everything. We are all learning something. So to have somebody that you can go to and say, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? What are your thoughts on this? Should I do it differently? Or maybe even just having regular conversations, check-ins, where you're making sure that you're hearing what other people have to say and they're hearing what you have to say, and making sure that these people are people of color, right? You do want to get different perspectives.
Absolutely.
This is how we learn and grow, is to hear from other people.
Yeah. Which leads us to our next slide: social awareness. Social awareness, and that's the ability to understand the perspectives and empathize with others. So I'm going to read off the first couple of practical ways and then just lean on just a couple of them. But practical ways in terms of social awareness is you make room for students to share about their cultural background, their heroes in their culture, and their family traditions. Diversify your content and expose your students to other cultures to normalize difference, because difference is normal. And to that, I want to say this. One of the things that we have as a lesson plan in Frenzy that I've been able to create is entitled What's in a Name? And when we talk about diversifying content, it's just easy. Having all of your students look up their last names online and discuss the origin. And what you find is we all come from somewhere. And it's a connector. Some students may have the same last name, but these are ways that help build a community, build connection, and this idea that we're different, but it's okay. And that'll show up in your classroom. When we talk about recognizing the strengths in others, there's a scripture that I love, and it says this in Ephesians 4:16. For in him, and that's Christ, the whole body is joined and held together by every supporting ligament. It grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. So when we're talking about recognizing the strength in others, we realize that we're many members, but we're one body, and all of us play an important role and part.
Yes, and I do want to point out these two points on there, on that identify diverse norms. It just kind of goes with what I was talking about, is when you sit in a classroom and you know your students, right? You know your students, you know where they're from, you know their background, you know what is considered a shared norm within their culture. I think it's important that you recognize that for students, because it's really important for students to feel like they belong in your classroom, and that they are seen. As somebody that works with students in different capacities, it's one thing that really is highlighted is that students want to feel like they belong in the classroom. They feel that that's, their friends are there, they have an adult that they can trust, that they enjoy being around. So just knowing that, your students have come from a different culture, whether, just being curious about it is helpful for students to feel that way. And then also that you want to understand how organizations and systems impact behavior. Now, we know, right? We know that the education system in our country is limiting to, your students of color. We know that, and because we know that, it's then our responsibility as educators to start bringing in those different curriculum, bringing in different ways of teaching, so students are getting that diverse experience, right?
Absolutely.
It's important that they know that, okay, yes, the system in itself is set up in this way. We can't change that, but what you can do is to bring it into your classrooms, and there are different ways that we can do that. So let's look at the next one. We're going to talk about relationship skills. Now, like I said earlier, this is really important because this is where all the work happens. This is it, right? You've looked at yourself, you looked at outside of yourself. Now we're looking at this interactive piece of where the work actually happens. So relationship skills is the abilities to establish and maintain healthy and supportive relationships. Now I'm going to point out the healthy and supportive isn't great relationships, isn't all positive relationships. It's healthy and supportive relationships to effectively navigate settings with diverse individuals and groups. So this is important that I want to highlight the healthy and supportive again. Absolutely. Because oftentimes when you think of relationships, right, there's going to be some conflict, right, in terms of communication, in terms of just understanding where you all are coming from, right? So it's really important that we know that we want healthy and we want supportive relationships. Now, this is building relationships with students is vital in a learning environment. When students feel as though they belong, like we said, it increases opportunities to learn. Again, I'm going to stress this point. This is all so that students are learning in your classrooms. Now, let's look at some practical ways of doing this.
So we're going to start with communicating effectively. And when we talk about communicating effectively, again, understanding that in that deeper lens of the cultural iceberg, that communication effectively means different things to different people. I had a parent share with me an interaction that he had with a teacher. A teacher called him to let him know that his daughter was, in her opinion, being defiant and insubordinate. What happened was, or as we say, what had happened was, the teacher had asked, let's call her Kara, if she would like to join everyone else on the carpet. Kara did not respond. The teacher asked again, Kara, would you like to join us all on the carpet? And Kara said no and did not join. Well, as the teacher was talking to Dad let her know, in our family, in our culture, when we need our child to do something, we make a statement. We don't ask a question. So you asked her a question and she gave you an answer. But the proper communication would have been, Kara, please come join us all on the rug. We're all reading. Mm-hmm. So that's just a small tip in terms of communication.
That's really, really important. And then our next point is creating a safe environment. Now, this is really important when you think of young people and their brains and what they're coming to do. If a student isn't feeling safe, their learning capacity is limited. And what they're worried about is just safety. How am I going to be treated in class? Am I going to be seen? Do I feel like I belong in the classroom? So these might seem like small things, but these are really big things in young people's lives.
Impact in your classroom.
And a way to do this, because you might ask like, oh, how do we create safe environments? Routines are really, really important. Now, if I know that every time I come into class, I'm going to check in, then I'm going to find a seat, then we're going to go through the lesson, and then we're going to check out. Like, these are all things that are really important for students to know, because then they know what's coming next. They know what to expect. So routines are really good in order to create safe environments.
Absolutely. And I'd like to say, Frenzy, we have a great daily check-in and exit tickets in our curriculum. So we can help you do that if you need help. Now, when we talk about demonstrating cultural awareness and curiosity, again, this is what I call the marathon and not the sprint. However, when your student makes a comment about their home, life, or community, take the position of a learner. Ask them what they mean. Don't make any judgments. If you're aware of what they're talking about, let them know, oh, I know what you're talking about, and make a connection. But use curiosity as a catalyst for a connection. Practice teamwork and collaborative problem solving.
Yes, and then the next one is to resolve conflict. Like we just said, in relationships, there is going to be some conflict. That's a given, right? And we just talked about earlier about how you respond in your classroom is going to have an impact on how young people feel in your classroom. It's going to set the tone of the culture in your classroom. So resolving conflicts constructively and resisting negative social pressures is really focused on how are you going to take multiple perspectives in a situation of conflict in your class. How are you going to do that? What is the response that you're going to give in your classroom? This might seem minor, but this is important to young people, especially young people of color who have had experiences where they're excluded, where maybe their voice isn't really necessarily heard, their perspective in terms of their culture isn't understood. This is a really great opportunity to build relationships with students and with students as peers, and you as an educator with your student. And then the last one is to stand up for the rights of others. Now, this is important. I think that when we think of the life of Christ and how he encourages that we're all part of one body.
Absolutely.
Right? And if we are a part of one body,
thank you.
It's really important that we look and see. We just talked about recognizing ourselves, what's going on with ourselves, recognizing what's going on around us, with the people around us, and interacting with people. It's really important that we are standing up for what's right and what's wrong, right? And some of the things like that can look like, not when you see somebody being disrespected, is to say that's not okay. And that speaks a lot to young people. I sit with young people in sessions and they talk about those minor experiences where nobody came in, right, and stood up for them and just said, that's wrong. So I really want to point that out, that standing up for the rights of others is really important, and just might even be like, stop that. That's not okay. Goes a really long way.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add to that. Thank you, Marcella, because what I'd like to add to that is we all know what is right and we know what is wrong, and we know when we see it. And so even though you may not have all of the cultural competencies and you may not even be able, but in that moment, just showing up for that student and being able to say, that's wrong, we won't have that in this class, will mean a lot for your students, and it'll mean a lot for a connection in the classroom. Matthew 25, 31 and 46. And believe it or not, our time is flying.
Yeah.
We're almost done here. It's very sobering, but what stands out to me in this chapter of Matthew 25 is where Jesus says, when you did this, and he's talking about the good, to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing this to me. And so everything that we're talking about, it's talking about the least of these, those that don't have a voice, those that may not have self-efficacy or agency. And you as the teacher, again, are that bridge to helping them realize that they have a voice, that they are seen, and that they are a part of the intentional design and work of Jesus Christ. And what a blessing, right? What a wonderful thing. And I know maybe all of these things won't stick today, but I tend to call myself a Mary in the gospel, because when the angel came to Mary and he spoke of things that would be, she pondered it in her heart. And so maybe you're that person today that it's like, how does this happen? How will this be? But take it in your heart and ponder it. And I believe that the Holy Spirit will bless it to grow over time. And you will see this not only in your classroom, but you'll see this in your world. And it'll be awesome and wonderful for you. So as we get ready to wrap down our time, we have one more reflection.
Yes.
And our reflection for you as you get ready to go is, what is your biggest takeaway from our time today? And which of these practical tools could you use tomorrow, and why? So what is your biggest takeaway from our time today? And which of these practical tools could you use tomorrow, and why?
Those are great questions. So to conclude, just to summarize what we just talked about today, is culturally responsive classes are necessary and beneficial for all your students. All your students benefit from this. And current state of our country, our classrooms, and the future is looking more diverse. So this is why this is really important that we're talking about this. And SEL provides great tools to increase culturally responsive classes. And you mentioned Frenzy. Frenzy has an SEL program that's really amazing because its focus is on relationships. It's the interactive piece. And culturally responsive classes are, conducted in relationships. So I do want to say that you all are doing such a great job already. And you all hold, just as you said, you talked about the importance of having you all as educators hold a big role in students' lives. You may not feel it, you might not think it, but I have the opportunity to hear these stories from young people where they're just talking about, an adult at the school that they go to, that they are connected with, that they enjoy, and that they feel seen.
Yeah, the teachers that make the difference in their lives. Yes. All right, in conclusion, we want you to know, next slide, please, that we have a resource page for you. So we have resources. Not only do we have resources for you, we have some handouts for you. We have 2 handouts for you, and these will be available on our virtual exhibit page, as well as you can search for Frenzy within the Cadence platform. That's the platform that NCEA is using. So you can find these handouts as well as our research page, resource page within the virtual exhibit page. And just look up Frenzy. In addition to that, next slide, please. In addition to that, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I'm Valerie at Frenzy.co. Again, Valerie at Frenzy.co, as well as please feel free to go to our page, our virtual page, and check us out there during the conference. We're here all week long. And please, please, please follow us at Frenzy.co. Finally, thank you so much for being with us.
It was great.
This has been wonderful. I hope it's been really fun for you all because it's been fun for us. We've had a good time.
Yes.
So we hope you've had a wonderful time too. Be blessed and have a great day, everyone.
Ladies, thank you so much for that presentation. I think I've got so many notes and questions that I've got. So thank you everyone for attending this live session at NCEA 2021. Please make sure to complete the post-session evaluation, which we are sending your way right now. Just hit that begin button. And you will use this opportunity, and please use this opportunity to check out our other live and on-demand sessions throughout the next 3 days. Visit the learning lounges to talk to your peers and to get some more questions answered. And don't forget to visit the virtual exhibit hall and so much more. This concludes, I believe, our first day session, and congratulations, everybody. Ladies, thank you again. That was an amazing presentation.
Thank you all. Thank you.